Gujarat is in the northwest of India. Part of this province is covered by the Gir forest. This jungle is home to one of the hundreds of tribes living in India, the Madaris. But there is also another inhabitant here, for the undergrowth of this tropical forest and the deserted plains of Gujarat are part of the realm of the king of beasts. These are Asiatic lions, closely related to their better-known African cousins. Several million years ago, when the big cats first appeared, lions were widespread. They were able to adapt to the climates of Europe and Africa, the Middle East and Asia. But as increasing human populations have filled the land over the last 3,000 years, so the number of lions and their living space decreased. Now, the Gir forest is the last bastion of the Asiatic lion. In the past, the men and lions of Gir were able to cohabit with a certain degree of mutual tolerance, but times are changing. This is the story of a king in search of a new realm. Every morning, well before sunrise, the forest rangers of the Gir National Park prepare for action. For the last few years, their work has been determined by new data. Having once been faced with extinction, the Asiatic lion became a protected species in 1965. Its numbers are now increasing. At the turn of the century, there were only 35 lions left in the region. Today, there are more than 300. But this means they must find new territories, bringing them dangerously close to human populations. So the ranger's job is not only to track and observe the lions, but also to arbitrate, to some extent, the conflict between lion and man. Murad is the most experienced of the rangers. He knows the lions well and can identify many of them. The rangers start by trying to find tracks left by the lions during the night. The Gir National Park stretches across 1,500 square kilometers with landscape varying between tree-covered hills, valleys, and plateaus, affording the lions a great deal more woodland than their African cousins. Many zoologists consider that the African and Asiatic lions are of the same species, Panthera leo. Others claim the two populations were separated some 50,000 years ago. The Madaris own huge herds of buffalo and live, as they always have, on clearings in the jungle called nesses. But the lions do not only bring danger to the Madaris. It is also thanks to the lions that the jungle has become a protected reserve, free from development, which allows the tribe to continue its traditional way of life. Like the other trackers, Murad's task is to follow the movements of one pride over a designated area. One of the traits that distinguishes the Asiatic lion from its African cousin is the white stripe running along its abdomen. The elbows are also covered with thick tufts of fur, and in the male, the mane is not as thick as that of the African lion. Zoologists who consider that the Asiatic and African lion are of the same species claim that much of the mane is lost in negotiating the thick undergrowth of the jungle. The male's ears are always visible, so it is sometimes difficult to differentiate between the sexes, especially in young lions. Although they do not underestimate the possible danger, the Gir Rangers never carry firearms. The present-day lions are not aware that the jungle once resounded with the guns of hunters. The lion has been the symbol of power and strength since time immemorial. At the turn of the century, lion hunting was the main form of distraction for foreign dignitaries in India, especially those from Great Britain. The Asiatic lion would most likely have been hunted to extinction were it not for the intervention of the enlightened Nabob of Junagadh. His domain covered a large part of the Gir forest, where only 20 or so lions remained. Aware of their probable extinction, the Nabob decided to put a ban on hunting and to involve the local population in the lion's protection. Broken Nose is a dominant male whose 10 square kilometer territory surrounds the Raidi waterhole. Lions must live close to water as they need to drink at least twice a day. One of the females in the pride, the lioness Asha, gave birth to 3 cubs 2 months ago. The cubs' nervousness suggests that this is one of their first visits to the waterhole. The lionesses are entirely responsible for the organization of the pride. 2 or 3 often give birth at the same time, which is to the advantage of the pride as a whole. If one of the lionesses were to die, the others would be able to feed and take care of the orphaned cubs. Asha has 1 female cub and 2 males, one of whom is decidedly more adventurous than the others. Of all the species of cat in the world, the lion is the most sociable, which is the probable reason for their success at survival. During the winter, the butia trees are in full blossom, much to the joy of these bulbuls and parrots that feed on them. Winter is short in Gir, lasting only from December to February, so the langurs, or leaf monkeys, must take advantage of the sweet petals while they can. Although lions can mate throughout the year, winter is the main period of reproduction. Lions only roar once they're full grown, and a lion's roar can be heard several kilometers around. A young adult male has picked up the scent of a lioness in heat. While signaling his presence with a roar, he nonetheless keeps his distance as he is on Broken Nose's territory. It is usually the lioness that takes the initiative in foreplay. She solicits the male by showing her hindquarters and by urinating on trees. After this ritual, Broken Nose displays his teeth in a grimace called flehmen. By revealing his gums, he is helping the chemical signals emitted by the lioness to reach his olfactory system. This will enable him to know exactly when she's ready to mate. Coupling takes place around 10 times a day over several days. Mike Pandy is an active member of the Department for Protection of Wildlife and Endangered Species. Born in Kenya, he knows wild animals well and is taking part in the new Indian government project to protect the Asiatic lions. There is a double objective. One is to reduce the amount of pressure from man in the Gir Reserve by moving the madaris. The other, to introduce a certain number of lions into a new reserve to the northwest of Gir. The government has just reached an agreement with the madaris. The chief of the tribe, Ismail Babu, has led by example. In exchange for arable land, he has agreed to leave the reserve and move several kilometers away.
रहने का मकान है वो अपना धर्म है यहाँ कुछ नहीं करते हैं बाहर जाके बढ़िया बढ़िया बातें छोड़ते हैं तो उसमें कोई वो धर्म की बात बड़ी नहीं है हाँ अभी 5 दिन पहले हमारी एक भैंस मार डाली है इधर हाँ यहाँ सामने हाँ यही
He accepts that the reserve is the domain of the lions. He has resettled successfully. He now has his own farm and his children can attend school.
ये कितना एकड़ सारा
जी
ये कितना एकड़ होगा सब
ये 3 एकड़
ये वाला सब
हाँ
This is the beginning of a new era for Gir and its inhabitants.
नर्स है ये तो खड़ा बाजू नहीं बात हमरी
અહીંયા 3 દીપડા જોયા અહીંયા 3 દીપડા જોયા
મારા પાછળ બતાવ તો હાથ કર
આ બાજુ ઉતરી ગયા પછી જો અહીંયા ઉતરી ગયા બે બચ્ચા અને એક ફીમેલ
The size of a pride's territory depends on the amount of available prey. Here in Gir, langurs, axis deer, and nilgai antelope are sufficient in number to ensure the lion's survival. For the past 3 years, Mike has been coming to Gir every 6 months to collect information from Murad and to study the behavior of the lions during the different seasons. The lion's reputation for laziness is only in part true. In fact, the male is often patrolling his territory. He marks certain bushes by leaving scent secreted from the glands in his muzzle and by urinating. He forms a scent boundary, marking his territory that other males will avoid crossing. Some young males live in pairs. These are usually brothers coming from the same litter of cubs that have developed an unbreakable bond. However, they will soon need to fight to decide who will become the sole king of the pride. They fight often, which explains why many males are covered in scars. In the jungle, many lions die as a result of their wounds, and it is very rare that a male lives for more than 12 years.
कोई यहाँ पकड़ रखो, इसको मैं पकड़ लेता हूँ, यहाँ पकड़ो, ताकत मत करना। दबो तो मैं तुम्हारे पास नहीं आने दूंगा, बस।
When Murad was 12, he was attacked and seriously wounded by a leopard. But remarkably, this attack has only served to immunize him from any fear of the jungle.
देखा कितना ताकत वाला है। यहाँ भी है, देखो ये रेड वाला बहुत है।
Manu Bai, the head of the forest rangers, has been asked to bring his men to Talala, a village some 30 kilometers to the south. Several days ago, a lioness and her 2 cubs found refuge in a sugarcane field. 5 villagers have been injured while trying to water their crop. Everyone is terrified of entering the field, and if this continues, the entire crop will be lost. The previous night, the lioness came out of the field in search of food and then returned to her cubs. Manubai decides on using a goat as bait. The lioness finally dares to show her head. The rangers are used to dealing with wild animals, but here they need to exercise the utmost precaution. If the lioness realizes she's being tracked, she will be at her most dangerous. They eventually decide to use a circus cage to catch the 3 lions together. If the mother were captured alone, the cubs would not be able to fend for themselves and would die. One of the rangers has volunteered to stay in the cage with the goat to pull the cord which closes the door on the lions once they're in. It's 4 a.m., mission accomplished. To keep the lions' panic to a minimum, the rangers will drive very slowly back to the reserve. This kind of task is becoming more and more frequent due to the territorial pressure forcing the lions to move out of the national park. As the sun rises, the axis deer are on the alert. But they have nothing to fear from these jackals, who are more interested in smaller game. They also have little to fear from the jungle cat. The axis deer, or chital, is the most common species of deer in the Gir forest, numbering 35,000. It is the favorite prey of the lioness, who is a more skillful hunter than the male. Hunting under cover in the jungle is easy for the lion. Its coat affords perfect camouflage. Lions usually target sick or weak animals. This natural selection is particularly important for helping keep down the number of fast reproducing deer and antelope. But for the animals of the Gir forest, there remains an even greater danger: the leopard. The leopard hunts alone and attacks anything that crosses its path: bird, antelope, deer, monkey, and as Murad will testify, even man. Zoologists estimate that in 4 out of 5 attacks, the intended prey escapes with its life, saved by pure speed and agility. Big cats tire after 100 meters and prefer to give up the chase. The Gir Reserve is home to the largest population of marsh crocodiles in India. They eat mostly fish and rarely attack the herds of cattle that cross the water. One of the reserve's main problems is the number of cattle herds crossing the jungle each day. The ground has been stripped of grass, and not having the time to regenerate has become irreparably impoverished. Mike has come to speak to the Madaris living on the Alawi Ness. The population wants to stay in the area as they can imagine no other way of life. Theirs is a nomadic existence, moving from place to place around Gir. But each time they move on, they leave behind large clearings to the detriment of the forest. Mike is nonetheless hopeful that he will eventually persuade them to accept change and settle in one place. 40 years ago, 75% of the lion's diet was made up of Madari cattle. Since the reserve was opened, this figure has dropped dramatically. The creation of the reserve has led to a thriving population of deer and antelope, which has become the staple diet of the Gir lions. This evening, Mike and Murad will be sleeping rough around the Alawi nests. The Madaris have told them about a pride of lions that moved into the area 2 days ago. The previous night, the pride captured a buffalo. Food is always shared out according to hierarchy. The males eat first, followed by the lionesses, and the cubs have to make do with the leftovers. The jaw of the lion, with its large, fearsome teeth, is designed more to rip meat than to chew. Each cub preciously guards its share. Disputes, though, are less serious than they appear and are often tests of agility or strength, proof that they are growing up.
So, Mike, what are you doing? I'm just looking at this.
Mahesh Singh is the director of the Gir National Park. For 10 years, he's been trying to enforce the protection project he himself set up. It was in 1990 that lions in search of new territory first crossed the western boundary of the park and established a satellite population.
This is the Gir area. And this road is passing to.
Mahesh has just been informed of a lioness and her cubs that have taken up residence in the thin strip of jungle running along the coast of the Arabian Sea. Mike decides to check it out, as it would be very rare to find lions living by the sea. Gujarat has 1,000 kilometers of coastline on the Arabian Sea, of which a part is made up of the Gir forest. The locals have been finding lion tracks on the beach for some time now. In this part of the world, lions have always lived in close proximity to man. But the fact that this beach neighbors the largest cement factory in the country makes these particular lions a serious problem. After several hours of waiting, the lioness appears. And she's accompanied by her cubs. They've set up home among the dense acacia trees that run along the coast. Here, as elsewhere, their main occupation is the search for food. Local fishermen are worried, as they have often spotted the lions at night while they're on their way home from the fish market. Panic is not yet widespread, but there is a great deal of concern. Mike realizes something must be done. The lions have established a territory which is completely unsuitable for their needs. 6 months later. It's the end of June, the dry season in Gir. During these few weeks before the monsoons begin, temperatures reach 50 degrees Celsius in the shade. The air has zero humidity and the jungle is completely dry.
Same again to that. They are darker and heavier and also have adapted themselves.
The government has agreed to reintroduce the lion to certain parts of India. For the project to succeed, careful organization and long-term planning are needed. Mike feels these lions are good candidates for the relocation program.
Those were nice.
It's important for Mike to study the lion's behavior in order to ascertain how best to capture them and how they will adapt once relocated.
This is the same fellow. He's got some billiard game. These will disappear. And now he's getting a beard, see?
The lions take advantage of the little shade remaining under the acacias. Another theory about the Asiatic lion's mane is that it is smaller than its African cousins in order to cope with the extreme heat. During this season, lions use up much of their body fluids trying to stay cool. So the best answer is inactivity. And lions, like all big cats, can sleep for 15 hours a day. During the 1960s, there were 2 attempts to reintroduce the lion into a neighboring reserve, but both projects failed. After several years, the lions had completely disappeared, probably the victims of poachers.
So this is a complete range that...
This time, the government has decided to open a new reserve to the northwest of Gir in the region of Barde. There, 500 square kilometers of jungle will offer a similar environment to that of the Gir forest, although presently there's not enough fauna to sustain many lions. So, to ensure the lion's survival, deer and wild boar will also be introduced. But before the lions arrive, it is even more important to move out the human populations. This part of the project will soon be finished. Mike is convinced that the project will be a success and that one day the hills of Barde will resound to the roar of a new population of lions. One year later, Murad and Mike are on the lookout in the shade of a banyan tree. They are back at the Raidi waterhole. the lioness Asha appears through the long grass. Her 3 cubs have grown. They're probably big enough to be relocated in the new Barde Reserve. At the turn of the century, an enlightened Maharaja just managed to save the Asiatic lion. The lion's first battle was won. Now, they face another equally important battle. If it is to survive, the Asiatic lion must be found a new realm.
Next Friday at 8, more wildlife with bite in Shocks, the real story.